Story 1. Not a gamer, but the earliest games I remember playing were Virtua Cop and Virtua Fighter. I think those were on the Sega Saturn. I don't remember from the top of my head at the moment, but they were fun. Story 2. No idea racing games. Doom. Motion sickness, had to bind mouse, look to mouse button, right click. Stopped it before I got used to it. Quake was fun. Story 3. It was a flip phone game. I was playing as some roaming character that would interact with their environment. I think I was playing as a boy who was exploring the outdoors. Story 4. I vividly remember 3 games I used to play a lot as a kid but can't remember exactly which one I played first. We had Nightmare Bed, Wizmo's Workshop, and Spyro Ripto's Rage. Truly a strange spread of games. Story 5. Super Mario Bros., December 25, 2000. My cousin got a knockoff console with Duck Hunt and Super Mario Bros. For Christmas. I was 8 years old, and at the time I didn't even know video games existed. I still vividly remember that moment. When I pushed the button and Mario jumped, my whole world changed. After that fateful day, toys just didn't cut it anymore. I got a PlayStation 1 on Christmas 2001, and 24 years later, I'm still gaming. Story 6. I think I started with Super Mario Bros. On the Atari. And when I was 5, I met a friend while playing Samurai Pizza Cats. He's still my best friend. And our WhatsApp group is called Samurai Pizza Cats. I don't know if anybody remembers that game. Story 7. The first game I ever played was probably from a knockoff Nintendo Entertainment System, but the first actual game I ever played was Half-Life 2, and I played the heck out of it. Story 8. Some arcade machine in the early 1980s. I couldn't tell you which one, but chances are it was something from Atari or Nintendo since they dominated arcades back then. Story 9. Call of Duty 3 campaign on the PlayStation 3. Loved it, but since I was terrible at the game, I didn't finish the campaign. I'm pretty sure I didn't even make it halfway through. Story 10. Mario on Nintendo Entertainment System was my first console game. But when I was a little older, I played Half-Life on a friend's personal computer, and it changed how I viewed gaming and really getting absorbed into the plot as you play. Story 11. Mrs. Pac-Man. Loved that game and used to take turns with my grandpa. I really wish I could go back in time and sit next to him again and watch him smile while playing. Story 12. Some balloon-popping game on Belgian-distributed artificial intelligence computer in the early to mid-80s. The complete source code was in BASIC and had to be typed out from a magazine you would receive by post or buy in the rare shop you had them. Less than 5 years after, it was DOS and Windows games on 8086, 286 computers such as Flight Simulator 2 Colors, Les Repos, then the first Indiana Jones. Slightly after, Wolfenstein 3D booted my career as a first-person shooter player. Story 13. Realistically, probably something on Windows 95 or one of those old CD Kids games like Spy Fox and Dry Cereal or Putt Putt Saves the Zoo. The first very impactful game for me, I'd say, was Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, shortly followed by Diamond, which was my first real game, I believe. I only got a PlayStation 2 after the PlayStation 3 was released, which opened me up to classics like Ratchet and Clank and Sly Raccoon, which I didn't hate or love. My real PlayStation 2 gems, honestly, were Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas, Dragon Ball Z, Budokai Tenkaichi 3, and WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2010. Everything changed about a year later when I got a PlayStation 3 and got Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. I was completely obsessed, and it was my first online game. I snuck in many hours, I think about 12 days before Call of Duty Black Ops was released, and I got Modern Warfare 2 in like June, laughing out loud. From there, I was a typical Call of Duty fanatic teenager, but I ventured into many other games over time. Assassin's Creed was the only other franchise that I really loved in the time leading up to Grand Theft Auto 5. Other games I would play for a while, but they could never replace Black Ops 2 or Grand Theft Auto 5. Eventually, I got an Xbox One because previously Xbox had Call of Duty rights, and I wanted to play competitively. But it turns out Black Ops 2 was the last good one. The same with Assassin's Creed. Black Flag was disappointing compared to the beautiful Renaissance Italy and the story of Ezio. I remember playing NBA 2K15 with some of my online buddies over summer holidays in Australia and looking out my window, thinking it looks nice outside, and I wanted to be out there instead of playing games. I went out walking around aimlessly, listening to the Goblin album by Tyler, the Creator, on a pair of beats for a few weeks until I met some kids at a park at the end of my street. From that day forward, I would spend all day, every day, outside at that park playing basketball, learning to skate, getting into mischief, and even eventually smoking bongs for the next 4 to 5 years or so until COVID-19. It never even crossed my mind to play games during that time. I just put the controller down that day and completely abandoned what had been, up until that point, a pretty big part of my life. I always have so much nostalgia when I think back about my gaming journey and the fun I had as an otherwise lonely kid before meeting those kids at the park. But I am always forever grateful I quit my video game addiction when I did and ventured off into doing something else. Story 14. I don't even know. Some weird space game on an Atari, but it wasn't our Atari. So the first one that I then really got as a gift was a Game Boy with Kid Dracula. Story 15. Super Mario World. Link to the Past is what truly made me a gamer. Super Metroid was when I realized how atmospheric and immersive a game can be. It was also the first game I ever fully completed, which inspired me to become a composer. Story 16. Oh, hard question for me. My mom was super into games and computers, so it's a toss-up between Super Mario World, The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, Pokemon the Trading Card Game, and a variety of computer games. Story 17. Here are multiple answers. The first game I ever played was a plug-and-play SpongeBob game that resembled his face. I remember it had a Burger Time ripoff, but my first PC game was Team Fortress 2. I can't remember the year, but I remember Yogscast did a Team Fortress 2 charity event. Story 18. Ultima 4. Except I didn't get to actually play. My sister had friends who would bring over games for my parents' Apple IIe computer. Once I found a floppy disk and tried it to see what it was. A fortune teller asking questions to determine my character. How cool. I answered all the questions and was ready to discover who I really was. Insert next disk. What? No, this is the only disk I have. Where's the rest? Sis, whose disk is this? Is there more? You don't know? None of your friends know? Where did this infuriatingly magical disk come from and how do I play? I never did find out where it came from or got to play the rest. Story 19. NASCAR Thunder 2004. It was my older brother's. That or Guitar Hero or Left 4 Dead. I remember playing with him. It wasn't the Yoshi game on Nintendo 64, was it? Or Super Smash Bros. I'm gonna go with NASCAR. Story 20. Console. Super Mario Bros. Nintendo Entertainment System. PC, Claw and Road Rash. Good old 90s game. Claw is a pirate game where you play as a cat pirate captain. Side-scrolling platformer. It has an animated intro. It still lives up to modern platforms found on itch. I wish I could play it again. Story 21. Grand Dizzy on Sega 16-bit with my dad when I was about 6. Never did manage to beat it between us, and I can't find the game at all these days. Searched and searched, but no luck. Story 22. Outside of my cousin letting me run around on Epona for a few minutes while he was playing Ocarina, there was this computer game I can't remember the name of from the early 2000s. I want to say that was similar to Pokemon. You explored around and caught these cute little creatures. I don't really remember the main goal of it, though. Story 23. Not sure, to be honest. Got a bunch with what was, at the time, my parents' personal computer. Stunts. Chuck Yeager's Air Combat. Golden Axe. Maybe a couple of others I can't recall. All of those are a credible claimant for that title. Early 90s. Story 24. I have a fun story regarding this. We went to a cousin's wedding, and my cousin's groom told all of our cousins that whoever reaches home first and calls me will get a surprise gift. My brother and I called first, so we got this gaming console as a gift, and we played Super Mario there. Mario is the first game I played. It was probably back in 2005. Can be Mustafa too. I'm not too sure. Story 25. Handheld Donkey Kong. On personal computer, it was on an XT clone playing a text-based trucking game. You had to get from the west coast of the United States to the east. There were 3 routes to take. Each turn, you typed in the speed you wanted to take, and you hope the police didn't pick you up for speeding. I ended up learning basic code and wrote my own text-based version. Story 26. It was so long ago that I can't remember which was first, but it would either have been a Pac-Man arcade cabinet when I was on holiday in Spain, aged about 5, or a Pong home machine my nan bought to keep me and my sister amused when we visited around that same time. Either way, it was around 45 years ago. Story 27. However, I have very vague memories of being at a family friend's house, and their teenage kids were playing a fighting game on their PlayStation, I think, and handing me a controller. I picked the Angel character. It might have been Tekken. Story 28. My uncle had an Atari ST with a monochromatic green and black monitor. In about 1991, my cousin showed me Henry's house, and I was mesmerized. I've been an avid gamer since then. Story 29. First game was probably Duck Hunt at my uncle's house. But the first ones that got me obsessed were Pokemon, Final Fantasy, StarCraft, and RuneScape. Growing up as a mid-millennial was a special experience. Story 30. Bubble Bobble with my mom. We had an Atari ST with 2 joysticks and would play for hours. My mom wasn't a gamer, but she got me into gaming. Thank you for this memory. Story 31. Depends on what you call a game. When I was 3, my dad sat me down with a 5¼ inch floppy disk that had a Disney Paint by Colors program on it. It was basically clicking a color, then clicking the picture to make that segment of the picture that color. The first game I remember that you would recognize was called Monster Bash, but also in that era were Jazz Jackrabbit and Dare to Dream. I'm pretty sure both were in disk operating system. Doom was also pretty early. I was 6 when I first played that, and it was pretty mind-blowing that those graphics were possible at the time. I believe that the game would stand up today if it were released. Story 32. Something on the Atari 2600 that belonged to an older sibling. I remember playing Pitfall, and he had one called Cops and Robbers, but those are the only 2 I remember. Story 33. Some little car game. I can't remember the name of it or even what kind of computer it was. It was a very early personal computer. I just remember the mouse being a huge ball that you rolled with your hand. Story 34. Daley Thompson Supertest on a ZX Spectrum 128K. Waiting 10 minutes for it to load, having to plug in a circuit board to attach your joystick. What a time to be alive. Story 35. 1999 Super Mario Bros. I think Deluxe, on Game Boy. I was 4 and had just had surgery. I was stuck in the hospital, and my cousin let me borrow his Game Boy. Story 36. Chips Challenge, Wing Commander Armada, and an Old Bed Baron flight game. I'm not sure which was first, but that was my first game library on my old Windows 95 ivory tower. Story 37. I'm not sure if it's Sopwith or Populous, but I remember not long after that I was playing Leisure Suit Larry in the land of the lounge lizards and guessing my way through the age verification questions about Ronald Reagan. Instead of following the convoluted plotline and trying to do inappropriate things with certain characters, I was going straight to the casino so I could play poker. Story 38. A version of Donkey Kong on my ZX81. I had to type in all the code from one of those magazines you used to be able to buy. I had to save the program on a tape player. I got to level 2 once and died immediately. Story 39. Super Mario Bros. When I was 5. Nintendo Entertainment System. Parents got me the gun, the running mat, and every Nintendo up to the 64. Now I have kids and responsibilities, but gaming will be passed down. My 3-year-old already loves Gran Turismo 7. Story 40. It might have been one of the newest Super Mario games. I was so young I barely remember any of it. The first game I played and wanted for my first game console was Donkey Kong 64. I got that game with a Nintendo 64 bundle that came with Star Wars Episode 1, Racer, Donkey Kong 64, and the Memory Expansion Pack. My family was very poor back then, so it was a special moment to get my console. I don't remember why I wanted Donkey Kong 64 specifically. I think as a kid I tried it, it seemed fun, and that was that. Nowadays, I do a lot of research before I start a game. Story 41. Damn, Putt-Putt saves the Zoo or Sega games as a baby with my dad. He loved to play Mega Man on his Game Boy while holding me and drinking a beer. He's a badass in all denim. Story 42. Windows 95, we had educational games, The Lion King, Aladdin, and Pinball 2000. I recall we also had an assortment of other games like Duke Nukem, Jill of the Jungle, Jazz Jackrabbit, Prince of Persia, and Commander Keen. When I was about 12, the first game bought specifically for me was Disney's Mulan on PlayStation 1. The next game was Final Fantasy VIII, and it started a lifelong enjoyment of video games. I've just finished Sea of Stars on a personal computer. Story 43. The original Castlevania on the first Game Boy in 1991. My dad bought the system while he was away in the Gulf War. He was the only one I've ever known to beat the game in one playthrough, as well as getting to the end of Tetris. Story 44. As far back as I can remember, I was 3 years old, and my mom and grandmother were playing Super Mario Bros. On the Nintendo Entertainment System, and they would occasionally let me take the controller and mess around so I could join them. I didn't know what I was doing, but I would jump and break blocks and such, so that counts. Story 45. My first game was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2007. I never played the campaign, though, because I was young and into the multiplayer. My first story game I ever completed was Detroit Become Human. Insane game, nothing like it. Story 46. I'm not sure, but my initial core gaming memories include playing Jurassic Park and Sonic with my cousin on the Sega Genesis, my late uncle showing me what a cheat Eddie was in Tekken 3, and finally, my parents getting me a Nintendo 64 and Cruisen World for Christmas '98. Story 47. Centipede at Chuck E. Cheese's. My neighbor had an Atari at his house, but it was his dad's, and I wasn't allowed to play it. I don't remember seeing my friend play it either,